According to the biblical account, the sons of God, understood by some as angels, came down to earth, took human women as wives, and from those unions came a mysterious generation unlike any the world had ever known. Their beauty and power captured the attention of those who witnessed their arrival. What began with astonishment soon became a dangerous fascination, and boundaries that were never meant to be crossed began to disappear, and curiosity soon became a choice that would change generations. Their mission was to mate with human women and father children with them. And they did everything they could to woo these beautiful women, using their extraordinary abilities and angelic powers to win their hearts. Captivated by their extraordinary presence, the women found themselves drawn to these mysterious men, who sought to win their hearts. They had no idea what consequences might come from crossing the boundary between humanity and angelic beings. Then the first sign appeared, a child growing within her. Then the first child was born, and nothing about him was ordinary. And what was born from that union would eventually possess power beyond ordinary human measure. He grew beyond every measure the people around him had ever known. And when the child arrived, everyone knew something was different. They became mighty upon the earth, feared by men and remembered as the Nephilim. But power without restraint brought violence, corruption, and darkness across the earth. And he was not alone. More of them began to appear. They did not live apart from humanity. They walked among ordinary people, their extraordinary size impossible to ignore. But what fascinated humanity had become a corruption that heaven would not ignore. But their growing power brought violence, and heaven was watching. But what began as an extraordinary opportunity slowly became an abuse of power. Before the judgment came, the ancient world was already entering a mystery unlike anything before it. Their strength became legendary, and fear began spreading across the land. These giants were fierce, intimidating, and destructive, spreading fear wherever they went. And when extraordinary power fell into hands without restraint, the world around them began to suffer. The giants did not have to destroy every home. Their very presence was enough to make ordinary people afraid to remain in their own land. Finally, God's patience reached its appointed end, and judgment came upon those who had abused their power and corrupted the earth. The boundary had been crossed, and God would bring the rebellion to an end. This reminds us that every opportunity and privilege from God must be used wisely and responsibly. According to the biblical account, those who crossed the boundary were confined in a place of darkness, held there until the appointed judgment. Once God locked them away, their freedom ended, and they remained confined in darkness, never again permitted to cross the boundary into the human world. Their story ended in silence, sealed away from the world they once entered. Some argue that perhaps God did not know at first, or perhaps he knew all along. If God knows all things, then he knew exactly what was happening from the moment it began. So the question remains, if God knew where it would lead, why did he allow it to continue? But knowing that something will happen is not the same as approving what will happen. What followed may have been the consequence of how that freedom was used. Perhaps what was allowed for a season was not an endorsement, but an opportunity, and that opportunity was abused. As a wise man once said, when purpose is not known, abuse is inevitable. Perhaps if God had approved of it, the ending would have been very different. What may have begun as freedom became corruption when extraordinary power was used without restraint. Their immense power became a tool of oppression and domination. And when the opportunity became corruption, God's response was no longer silence. Whatever had been permitted for a season, the boundary between heaven and earth would now be restored. Perhaps we will never know every reason God allowed it for a time. But Scripture makes one thing clear. When corruption reached its limit, God intervened.